recorded live.
Testing 1, 2, 3. How's the audience tonight? How are you, Aaron? Good, good. I'm just testing out this TalkShoe program, and now I'm getting a massive echo. But I can see your chats there. Question is, how do I get rid of these echoes? Because I didn't have the echoes before. I'm dialed in through TalkShoe. Test 1, 2, 3. Yeah, through Shoe phone. Boy, that's annoying. Do you have a headset on, Aaron? Which you're not dialed in through anything. Let me just disconnect and try and reconnect here. This is a test. This is a test. This is a test. Can you hear me now, Aaron? Test 1, 2, 3. 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 Keeps, Test 1, 2, 3. Let's try that again. Test 1, 2, 3. Can anybody hear me? All right. How are you doing, everybody, tonight? Well, this will be my first show. I'm just trying out different pieces of software, to be honest with you. And I picked a topic that's sort of been consuming my every spare minute for the last few months. So it's been a bit of an obsession of mine, unfortunately, for everyone around me, friends and family. A lot of people call it waking up. I never really heard the term before, but I'll just briefly go through this whole 9/11 hoax psyop that basically has thrown me for a loop. I'm not sure about any of you other guys, what you guys think about it, but as soon as I figure out how to... I guess all you guys are listeners of the show right now, from what I can understand, and the only way you can talk is I think your phone lights up, and then I'll put you through. So if anyone wants to join in and just tell me afterwards what your impressions are about 9/11, and if you've ever even heard of waking up, I'd be happy to talk to you. But anyway, the whole thing started... I'm an American living in Canada. So the whole thing for me started when the IRS started calling all Americans all around the world, asking for them to submit a tax return now to the IRS. Now, I submit a tax return in Canada, so because we have an agreement between the countries, there never has been a need to submit to the IRS, number one, and number two, any tax I pay in Canada counts for the IRS, and that's always been that way. So there's no taxes due as long as you don't make gobs of money, which I don't. So anyway, that started to annoy me and got me curious as to why all of a sudden the IRS is going crazy, going after people. So, and then the other thing they wanted was all your worldly assets. So I have a few small Canadian assets, so I had to fill out extra forms and mail them in just to let them know that I had small retirement savings. So anyway, that's what got me interested in trying to figure out what is happening in the U.S. government. Of course, up here in Canada, we follow the American news quite closely. We get it all. So anyway, I guess I just started Googling around like I do anytime I have a question, like most people. I just Google it just to see what exactly I can find an answer to my question. And for some reason, that led to 9/11. I can't remember exactly why, but of course, like everyone else, the whole topic of 9/11 was always on my mind as a completely unresolved issue, in that we all know what happened that day, but none of the stories ever added up. But life went on, and like any good American, you figured, well, obviously it's probably the way the government said it went down, so let's go over and bomb some countries, clean things up, show them who's boss, and come back home, and everything will be fine in the world again. But of course, the wars will go on. They went on and on and on. So I guess I stumbled upon a movie called Loose Change. You guys are probably familiar with Loose Change. Essentially, it answered a lot of questions about the Pentagon, about the lack of plane, addressed some theories about the planes around New York, and whether they hit, whether they didn't hit, whether they started flying somewhere else, whether they exchanged planes with military planes, and probably left more questions unanswered than answered. But it started to grow. For me, the movie crossed a few T's, dotted a few I's, and started to make sense. So I still wasn't satisfied. It was like eating junk food. You eat some, but you're not satisfied, so you want more. So I looked into more and pretty much resorted to YouTube to do some research, look at some more clips, and follow some more paths, see a few more movies. At that point, I got acquainted with Alex Jones. Because I spend a lot of time on the road, I have a lot of time to listen to audio, so I downloaded a few of Alex Jones' show, tried to figure out who he was, and I found him an interesting talk show host to listen to. His voice sounds like a chainsaw, so it was a little difficult to get through listening to that. But anyway, he reintroduced me to Waco. I think that's what he said was his first big claim to fame. And of course, being up in Canada and not being really that interested in Waco, other than the fact that it sounded like a cult that was busted up. Alex explained a lot of that, and he made sense in a sense, but his fact that he was saying the government went overboard with the military, that seemed reasonable, but I had nothing to refute it with. But anyway, so I listened to Alex for quite a while. He opened me up to a lot of things going on down there. But again, he didn't do a lot of talking about 9/11. It seemed that was past. So, again, I watched a few more movies. I'm trying to think of a few of them now. One of them, I believe, was In Plain Sight, which was done a few years after. Bear with me. Let's see if I can see some of the other movies. And then again, I started listening to some talk shows, looking at some internet forums. And the bottom line is that I was never totally satisfied with the answers I got. Obviously, it was a huge event, changed the world, but I didn't feel I was getting all the answers. So I just kept digging and digging and digging. And apparently, the bottom line is, for me, is that I found I'm constantly going down different pathways, listening to different show hosts. So, in the end, it seemed like we'd always get so far listening to some of these talk show hosts and listening to some of these movies, but no one gave a real convincing answer. Were there planes? Were there no planes? But the bottom line is it seems that we've got to the point where in the last 3 months we've got to a couple websites. One was called Let's Roll Forums, and another one is September Clues. Now, both websites seem to have satisfied most of my questions about 9/11, and it appears that I'm going to satisfy myself with knowing that it appears that the towers were hollow. They were it seems like they were built to be destroyed, which is another hard one to swallow. And it appears that the victims were simulated, and essentially the whole thing was a movie. Now, I'm not really going to go into the details because it doesn't really matter. But this is more of a show about just discussing the psychological aspects of it and how it can really consume and destroy people's lives. For instance, when I started talking about this with friends and family, boy, it is one impossible task to talk about. First of all, most people do not want to talk about it, period, because it's upsetting to most people. And I think the main upset is that 3,000 people were alleged to have died. And just talking about that just at one point will shut most people down, so they will not listen to you. But unfortunately, if you get the bug about 9/11 in your brain, you have to talk it through. You almost have to see someone about it, because if you're like me and do all the minimal research just to try and get the real picture, it pretty much illustrates to you that you're being lied to on a grand scale by your government. And that is a real tough pill to swallow. Now, of course, there's all kinds of little lies. We're all familiar with little lies. And governments might cut a few corners here and there and not exactly tell the truth. But what if they have actually been able to perpetrate a big lie and get everyone to believe it? Then what? Then all of a sudden you are the one that has a problem. Because now all of a sudden you feel you know what happened, but everyone else doesn't know what happened. So if you start using terms like I've awakened, I now know that I'm being lied to here, so now because I've agreed with myself that I've been lied to on this big topic, well, now all the little things that are a little bit more minor aren't as minor anymore, because maybe what the government is telling us about this isn't true either. And you could just open up a history book and start going back in time and say, wait, well, if 9/11 was a big lie and a big hoax, then what about any event before that? And that's the problem. So now you are walking around and it seems like you can't trust anything you hear. And the more you start talking about these kind of things with people you know, the crazier they think you are. And the more, because you're controversial, they will shy away from you and almost shun you. Well, then you have to make a decision. You make the decision, do I want to pursue this and drive everyone around you crazy, or should I just drop it and continue leading a peaceful life? For instance, most people in this consumer society get a job, have a family, put in long hours, try and make as much money as possible to support the family, and obviously you get in a rat race, you get on the treadmill, and you get into debt, and you just have to keep going very quickly. And you can't take any time off, because if you take too much time off, you've got the problem, well, will someone try and take my job, number one, or number two, will they not miss me at work, or number three, how am I going to pay all these debts? I have to keep running and running and running. So you can understand why people after 10, 15, 20 years can start to crack and want to get off the treadmill and just withdraw, say, to a small property and just grow vegetables, just to totally withdraw. So it's sort of the same idea with investing a lot of time looking into 9/11. Do you want to keep spending time looking into it, keep alienating people, or do you want to just forget about it and just say, well, it really isn't going to affect me all that much. I'll just be like everyone else, as Capricious says, a consumer zombie, and just resume eating, sleeping, and doing a few things in between. And you can understand why a lot of people, I would say most people, would prefer to do that. But I contacted again. First of all, I came on strong with people that about 9/11, and most of them stopped talking to me quite quickly and wanted to change the subject. But again, others would give me a few minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, to make my point. So then all of a sudden you're confronted with the 9/11 story, and you try and make a few points that you think are really strong, and you try and make them to these people to try and convince them. And if you don't hit them with a good punch right out of the gate, then you're going to lose them quite quickly. So I wasn't sure. I tried different methods with different people. Unfortunately, at the beginning, I was of the opinion that the government destroyed the towers with some kind of nuclear bomb or some kind of directed energy weapon. I was going with that theory for a while, and the nuclear aspect really upset me. So it was at that point that I was talking to other people, and they could see I was tremendously upset and tremendously bothered by it. And most of them couldn't argue with me, because most of them were simply at the point where they believed exactly as they heard it, which I never believed it exactly as I heard it. But as I said before, my research, before just doing some simple reading, I pretty much just walked away from it thinking, well, there's a lot of loose ends and there's not much I can do about it. And to be honest with you, I'm surprised I didn't look into it earlier, because as I found out, there's a wealth of information out there, a wealth of people that are looking into it. So really, I could have got my answers maybe a lot earlier, particularly about the Pentagon. I think that was the first scene that most people had a problem with, because it really made no sense. And then Shanksville was a big one, because again, it just looked like a hole in the field, and there were so many competing theories that really didn't make sense. But no one seemed to be doing anything about it in any official capacity. do. You just walk away and forget about it, really. So that's what we did. And but anyway, I'll just talk about some of the other psychological things that have happened to me since investigating 9/11. So, like I told you, I started listening to Alex Jones, but again, he was like a very loud chainsaw talking for 3 hours, and it became aggravating. I gave his website to a few other people to listen to just to get their opinion, and most of them wouldn't listen to him for 5 minutes. And so after Alex Jones, I started finding some other talk show hosts that I could listen to because, as I said, I'm on the road a lot, so I wanted to listen as opposed to read. And found a couple other talk shows, and one of them was The Real Deal with Jim Fetzer. And he is a professor, retired, lives in Wisconsin, and he does a pretty good show. And he's quite sincere the way he was looking into it. And he really had me going as well. And as soon as I introduced his name or started looking up his name, because I figured, well, since everyone is questioning every aspect of the people involved with this, may as well punch in his name too. I punched in Alex Jones, of course, and got lots of people that were down on him and thinking that his views were wrong and he was paid, and I learned all kinds of new terms like shill and Right. I think I'm back. Can anybody hear me now? That was fun. I guess that's one of the disadvantages of this program. Um, Interesting. Sorry about that. It's nice to see a few people interested in listening. And of course, when you're busy reconnecting a computer, you usually lose your train of thought completely. So I can see why this might be a drawback to this program. I don't know. I guess it's going to take a while to figure it out. But again, this is just an experiment to see if I can actually do a talk show. So far, it looks like it's a lot harder than it sounds, and you can understand now how talented some of the people are. I'll just go over I'm just trying to remember a little more history. I don't know how many of you guys are Howard Stern fans, but I've been listening to him for a long time. And to be honest, he is sort of how I got interested in 9/11 now that I think about it. Occasionally, a few years ago, he had Jesse Ventura on. And we all know the history of Jesse Ventura, former governor of Minnesota, former wrestler. And I always like people like Jesse because he's a bit of a rebel. He doesn't fit in any one mold. He's interesting. And I think he was promoting either a book or his conspiracy theories show. And I'm always been interested in conspiracies and whatnot. So if I have to blame anyone for getting me interested in 9/11, it was probably him for whatever he was saying or talking about. So that's a little bit of history. I've always enjoyed radio. I always thought I could do a talk show. But again, I guess after a while you figure out most people aren't really interested in hearing what you have to say. If your friends and family are any judge, most of them will turn you off quite quickly. So it does take a real talent, I think, to hold an audience, as I'm proving now. That's if you can keep a connection going. So, as in TalkShoe bombing out on me. So that's pretty much how I got interested in 9/11, from what I remember, other than the fact that we all witnessed it. But anyway, I'm just sort of riffing right now. I don't really have a whole much more to add other than I just wanted to interact with callers. If any of you guys want to talk, that would be fine. We can just chat about what your impressions are on 9/11. Since there aren't too many people listening, it's sort of a private conversation if you look at it that way. So if any of you guys want to just tell me what you think about it, you can just maybe get a back and forth going if anyone is brave enough to talk. Now, I don't know who's online right now. I think I have a couple guys left, but it looks like there's old people on here. But it looks like some people that have left have just, they're grayed out. So again, I'm not sure exactly how the software here works. Or if it makes any sense to just read the chats at the same time I'm trying to talk. T Idaho, I guess that's sort of short for Tea Party. And Idaho, you're on there and you say that you think that the awake are targeted. Well, that's an interesting idea. I don't know. I'm not sure anyone who's awake really has any power to do anything. The only thing, and that's one thing I get all the time from people. They say, well, what good is it knowing if you believe that the government orchestrated the whole thing? Really, what can you do? And then it goes back to questions I've always got all the time where people say, why do you bother voting? Now that I figure, well, because that's our right, that's what we should do, and it's the right thing to do. But again, of course, as an awake individual, whether I stay awake or not, I don't know. Probably doesn't do any real good. I as an individual am absolutely no threat to anybody because as a voice in the wilderness, as it were, it's quite clear that there's almost no one around that I know that is interested in being awake either. Being awake has sort of a religious overtone to it, and most people that aren't religious is that they think there's something wrong with you if you say you're awake. But yeah, I guess the Idaho is saying the downside of being awake is being blacklisted and then targeted. Well, I think your own people around you, friends and family, tend to blacklist you more than anything. So again, an individual is not really a threat. And you can talk to other people, and I find the more wealthy and the more intelligent the person is that I talk to, the less they're interested in believing anything I have to say. The lower on the economic scale people are that I talk to, the more willing they are to believe any kind of conspiracy of any kind committed by the government. So that's sort of an interesting juxtaposition. I talked to a couple mechanical engineers, old physics teachers, people that I consider smarter than myself, and I don't go into what I think. I just ask their opinion. I just said to them, where do you stand? What do you think happened to the World Trade Center? And most of them just brush it off with a quick, well, plane hit it, fuel burn, they collapsed, that's the end of the story. So essentially they shut you down just by the quick statement. And I have a friend who's writes a weapons newsletter, Defense Department or the defense industry, and I showed him Dr. Judy Wood's site just for fun. Again, saying, "What do you think of this? Does it hold any water?" And his response was, "You're nuts. I thought you were smarter than that." And in retrospect, after doing a little more research, I guess I am smarter than that. However, at the time, it seemed like a pretty good theory, as crazy and outlandish as it sounded. And little did I know I was probably following a trap, following a rabbit trail down a hole, and that was deliberately set. So, not sure I can be faulted for going down that rabbit trail in that hole because it was deliberately set. And I suppose the levels of this PSYOP are so well thought out that they create different traps for different levels of people's intelligence, or more likely, different levels of people's willingness to further investigate the whole 9/11 thing. So their idea is they catch you hopefully at an initial level where it seems like it's impossible to know what happened, and most people just will become completely disoriented, completely annoyed, and walk away. And I would say that would take out the majority of people. But if there are people who are persistent, no, they really want to know, they really aren't satisfied with this particular level of answer, so they move in another level. And again, it's like an adventure game on a computer. You just open another door, and there's a whole new world. And then you go down that path, and get lost in that whole wing of the adventure game. And then that wastes more of your time, takes more of your time. So, again, you go through levels. And I think if you get to one of the top levels, which I think is where I am at now, you are, number one, there aren't very many people at this level, and so it's much more difficult to get anyone to come up to your level and agree. So then you have to make a decision. You really want to stay at this level and try and talk to people about this, or do you want to walk away and drop it? Because really, what is left to do? Okay, you think you figured it out. That's great. What are you going to do about it? What can one person do about it? And probably the answer is absolutely nothing. That's why nothing has really happened. And then you have to decide how you're going to pursue the rest of your life, knowing that you are literally in this matrix that is completely set up and arranged for you, where you can only take a few paths, you can only stay in a certain area, and once you go and want to get to the next area, then you either have to accept that you're in a system that you can't get out, or try and fight it, which is virtually impossible because they control everything. They control every aspect of the economic system. So really, there's nothing much you can do about it. Can't move forward. So anyway, that's where I am with this whole 9/11 thing. And of course, the only good part about 9/11, in my mind, is it opened my whole way of thinking up to other so-called truthers, and they're talking about a lot of other conspiracies, whether they be conspiracies or just the way things are, because when two people get together and start working together, they're conspiring by the very definition. And when two people or three people are together, there's a good chance they are trying to cut a corner, which I guess could be being up to no good. So that is a conspiracy. So therefore, not there. Anyway. So I think probably the best way to proceed, I'm just as an example, I think maybe the best way to proceed with a talk show like this is to, I'm just looking at some of the chats now. No, I don't work for any of the American agencies, because I'm not even in America, to be honest with you. So, no, I work for no agency. I'm just a person that got interested in this, got absorbed by it, and wanted to see if there are any other people outside my immediate circle of people I know that are interested in talking about it, mainly because I've gone through all the people I know, and most of them I've decided not to continue talking about 9/11 or other so-called conspiracies, for the simple reason that it just turns them off. And most of them will not look into it at all, which I find fascinating, how people can just go around and not just pursue things a little more that are outside their own lives. But then again, most people are not interested in politics. I find another niche crowd. So most people that listen to talk shows are usually into politics first, entertainment second. So again, it doesn't have a big audience, and as 9/11 slowly fades into the past, and even fewer people are interested, and even fewer people want to talk about it, and even fewer people have a clue what you're talking about. So yeah, I suppose a lot of them are government fronts. Some of these talk shows. Oh, gee, Idaho, if you want, let's just have a little back and forth and see if anyone wants to listen. I think what I'm going to try and do is just find other people that are like-minded, and we'll just have back and forth conversations, because I find it is difficult to just riff without notes. Mainly tonight I just wanted to see if the software actually worked and see if anyone could actually hear me, and just see if anyone else has gone down this path that I've gone down in the last 3 months. Anyone has an experience dealing with it, and really, if there's anyone interested in talking about it, ask others. Yep, that's my first show. Didn't think I would even try a radio show. I didn't even know the software existed, to be honest with you, T. Idaho. So I thought, well, this TalkShoe looks like an interesting piece of software, and it might be actually kind of fun. So, but I just wanted to see, to be honest, if anyone would show up for the show. So I got more people than I thought. There seems to be a real dearth of shows other than religious and a couple other odd shows on this TalkShoe. So, and I appreciate that, T. Idaho. I think it's just my my headset seems to be quite clear, but I think what I'm going to try and do is find a few friends that I've tried to pound this 9/11 information to, and get them to ask me questions, and maybe that might be interesting to people. But I'm not quite sure. I can't probably contribute much to 9/11 research other than what other people have done. I'm like I've told others in the earlier in the show. I'm pretty sure that the September Clues website, the Let's Roll website, I'm pretty sure those guys are closest to, I'm not going to say the truth, but closest to what happened that day. But as for who was actually doing the conspiring, who was complicit, I don't think anyone's really ever going to get an answer. I don't think anyone is going to be able to figure it out. And the people that are blaming certain groups, and I hate blaming groups only because it could be the group that did it that is just pointing you to the group, and then you're just falling down another rabbit hole, another trap. So that is a definite disadvantage, and that's a definite thing you want to stay away from. And I think the minute you start talking about particular groups, religious groups, ethnic groups, well, you will completely shut off that group if you start talking about them. And even if that is the group most likely to have conspired, well, they're still good people. They're still mostly good people that you do not want to turn off. You'd rather you want them on your side. You want them on the good side. So it's really useless to identify any group of people, religious or otherwise. Any people that are members of a group, not necessarily by choice but by birth, well, you have no idea what's in their minds. So it's an awful thing to just start talking negatively about the group. However, just in doing some reading, there is a group that I thought could be identified as what we call the perpetrators, and that group are to be named psychopaths. And one of the talk show hosts I listen to is Kevin Barrett, who does talk shows with Jim Fetzer now and then, and he wrote a really good article on psychopaths. And I've met a couple psychopaths in my life. I'm sure many people have met psychopaths, but a psychopath has to be a person that has no empathy or no ability to feel what no conscience rather, no ability to feel consequences of their action. And the article is excellent. I should have written it down. If I was organized tonight, if I do this again, I'll actually make some notes and actually do some pasting into the chat room here where people can click on articles and try and follow what I'm reading, and maybe that'll make sense to them. But again, the psychopathic group, people that are in positions of power, can easily get together, interface, and compromise whatever organization they're working for or with, and make whatever they want to happen. And whether it be evil, which is what most people look into or what most people end up doing, that's what they'll do. And I guess my first impression about 9/11, when I started hearing about the government did it, like everyone else, I thought, well, the government and their organizations are pretty much too incompetent to just deliver basic services. How could they possibly organize something like this, pull it off, and then keep it quiet and make it look like somebody else did it? And that was my overriding theory for years. Not that I believed their conspiracy theory of the hijackers and the planes, but because, again, I didn't research it and I didn't really know too many people were looking into it, I just figured, well, we're never going to get to the bottom of it, so what is the point of worrying about it? It's not really affecting me directly. But of course, over the last few years, the heat is being turned up on the people of America with all their laws that are starting to circumvent the Constitution. And again, it's incremental. It's the old boiling frog theory, which I never heard of until, again, doing my research. And for most of you learned people have heard the story, how do you boil a frog? And of course, if you boil the water and try and put the frog in, he'll jump out. That's pretty easy. But if you put the frog in the cold water and slowly turn up the heat, well, eventually the heat will make the frog groggy, and then he won't have the energy or the inclination to hop out of the water, and he indeed will boil alive. And that, I guess, is the nature of these laws that slowly take away people's rights. And the biggest right, of course, very funny, BLTHTM. Yes, we are being boiled. Slowly, the American people are being boiled. And a lot of people are saying it's a possible duplication of what they did Germany after World War I, where they essentially turned the heat up on Germany, started punishing them economically, where they basically cried out for anybody to help them, and Hitler was there, put in place, and Hitler was their man to get them out of their jam. And I'm not an expert on World War II or Hitler, but what I do understand, it appears that nobody rises to power on their own, especially if you believe the last few presidents. People are put in power by people that pull the strings, have the money, and want a certain agenda carried out. So presidents, chancellors, prime ministers are essentially just frontmen, actors that are put in place to carry out their agenda. And agreed, T. Idaho, that course, all those Patriot Acts, the NDAA, all these things that really make speaking out or being different or being targeted a big problem, because you can be arrested and detained, tried, and executed without due process. And that is a very, very scary thought. It should be a very scary thought for most. I know it is for me. It should be for everybody. I think, as we all know, there was a recent case where a Marine, I guess he's active duty, was detained for Facebook posts. Now, the Facebook posts looked a lot like most of the stuff I read and listen to on all the different blogs, different tweets, going through pretty much what most people are saying quite publicly. And the Fed, get the gold standard back, repeal all these un-American laws, NDAA, Patriot Act, and of course, maybe because he was active duty, maybe because he was going to be made an example, they detained him and put him in a mental hospital, which we all know what can happen when you go in there. If you've watched any of the shows or done any of the research on mind control and mind altering, and I guess there was a big fear that once he went in, he wouldn't come out. And that's a scary thought. But I thought the difference with his family was interesting, because he had a mother who I watched on YouTube. Of course, it wasn't on the mainstream news. He had a brother and a daughter, and all three of them were singing from the same hymn book with regards to, you guys, Americans, better watch out, watch your government, see what they're doing. Our son has been targeted. I thought it was magnificent. I only was wondering where the father of the family was. That would have been interesting if a whole family was singing from the same hymn book. But apparently it got him out of there. I guess he was released. Again, it's hard to follow. Luckily, there's a few people on YouTube and a couple of alternate media sites, whether they be controlled or not, I don't know, that got him out. Apparently he's out, but I think it was a bit of a litmus test to see what public's awareness is, number one, and number two, what their tolerance is for that kind of arrest. And it's pretty clear that a few people spoke out, and I'm glad they didn't lobotomize him, but I don't think we really know whether A, the whole thing was true, or B, whether they did do something to him. But it is a pretty scary thought. It's a very Soviet USSR kind of thought, where speaking out, you can be detained, we don't get to know what happens to you. And that is a real scary thought, I find. I don't know what the rest of you guys think. But anyway, well, I think it might be wise to wrap the show up at this point. This is more of a test show. And I think he's out, T. Idaho. I think he's out. This is more of a test show. I just wanted to see what the capabilities of the software were. It looks like we got logged out halfway through, which would be a big problem. I think we either lost a few callers because of that, or because I bored people to tears. But it was kind of fun. But I think it'll work better if I have someone to talk to, have a guest. And I just really want ordinary people on here that have a 9/11 or an awakening experience they want to chat about. I think that'd be more interesting, because there's a few other talk shows that certainly do what I'm talking about way better. They do hold more of an interest. I wanted to hear an everyday talk show just to see, again, what other people think. So I'm just going to maybe get the odd unawake person maybe on and see if I can talk to them, lead them through, and see if that's interesting to listen to. So I'm going to sign off for now. I might come back next Saturday. We'll see. Same time, same place. And see if there's any interest. So thanks for the guys that hung in the whole show, T Idaho and a couple others. And we're going to sign off now. Maybe next time come back with a few extra notes. Bye.